Hi everyone and welcome back to Chess for Charity. In this video, we are going to do a shortest proof game for the position on your screen. So in this position, there are 6 moves for white and 5 moves for black. Notice that there are some missing pieces, and the goal is, try to highlight the right piece, the goal is to see if you can figure out how to get that configuration in 5.5 moves. So what 5.5 moves means, like I said, 6 moves for white, 5 moves for black. Okay, so if you want to take a second and try to solve this, feel free to solve it. It's kind of fun. These proof games are really interesting. I like proof games, retrograde. I like all that logical stuff. It's kind of part of who I am. Hopefully you enjoyed as well. If you're that kind of person, feel free to pause it. If not, maybe consider watching, because it's pretty interesting. Okay, let's get started here. So one thing that I noticed right away was that this pawn is gone. And the first thing I thought was, how in the world could this pawn be gone? Because black only has 5 moves. And I thought maybe I can swing the knight in. Maybe like 1. I thought maybe like this. Move the pawn, move the knight, maybe do something with the knight, and then get captured. Let's put moves on the board. Like this. I thought 1, 1, 2, 2, and then I thought 3. Here I kind of ran out of a move. 3, 4, 4, 5, 5. Getting somewhere, but I'm missing this guy, and of course I could capture that, but it's not going to work the way I want it to work. So I kind of kept considering what to do, reset the board, what to do about this pawn. And I kind of thought, okay, I need to figure out how I can capture this piece, this piece, this piece. So I thought, okay, let's think about the knights. I have a knight on G1, a knight on B1. Let's use our knights. So I thought, what if I could somehow bring the knight in, like this, maybe use this pawn, something like this, set myself up, something like this, here, and then this part was not very clear to me when I was thinking, but maybe something like this. But this doesn't really get me what I want, because if you look, it's close, but not quite, right? I'm getting there, but not quite there. So let's reset the position one more time. Let me hit the actual load button. Okay, so when you think about this more and more, you think, how can I accomplish the goal of getting rid of this pawn and these pawns and the queen? And every problem, I think, has a crux somewhere. There's like a heart of the problem. And once you have the key insight, you've pretty much solved it. So there's always a problem within the problem, essentially. And for me, the problem was about, like I said, this pawn, but also this pawn on f7. How am I going to swing around and get this pawn and the queen and the pawn? And I was like, I'm not seeing that. So then I thought, instead of the pawn on the f file, let's look at the pawn on the d file. That's the other pawn missing. So if I played knight c3, which makes sense, because if I play d5, I can already take it. So maybe I'm on the right track. d5. And then I thought, okay, this makes sense. I can play this move, which will give up my knight. And then I could take here, right? No, I can't. Look at, this is what I was failing to see. This is check. Like this. So that has to be taken 1, 2, 3, or the king has to move 4, 5, right? There are only 5 legal moves in this position. So I kind of overlooked that. I thought, man, my goal was take here with the queen. I take back, and then somehow I maneuver my knight around, and I've got that pawn, and that queen. And I thought I was in pretty good shape. And I thought, no, that doesn't work out. I abandoned that plan. And I kept thinking, how could this knight or this knight ever get around to taking this pawn and making its way back? It's 6 moves for white. If it's 6 moves for white, that means my last move had to be me returning to the square I already was home. So for example, maybe my last move was some move queen d1. Right, and I thought that makes sense, or maybe knight b1 or knight g1. Some move to put my pieces back in place. Okay, so let's think about that. Well, I need to get rid of these pawns. So like I said, I was pretty invested in this knight idea because once I saw this one and I couldn't see a way to really break free in this idea, like I mentioned, I noticed that I could take this pawn, but then it just felt too slow because how am I catching this guy and how am I losing this one? It didn't really work. So if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm going to start giving away a lot more of the solution. So this is your last chance. If you want to pause the video, feel free. Okay, so it turned out the idea that I had originally with knight c3 and d5, that was the right idea. And I just failed to look deep enough. Let me explain how. So, one of the key insights is this knight would make a cycle. If I move this knight a bunch, it'll make a cycle back to its home square. Right? Even number of moves will give me the same color square, like this and like this. So I take this pawn, oops, not like that. I take this pawn, and I remember I mentioned f6, and then I took, and I thought right here this was a bad idea because I got to move the king. Well, it turns out that's totally fine. King f7. And now what? Well, now I have to cycle my knight back in. That would get me back home. But remember, I'm missing this pawn. Well, that's fine, because look, knight e4, and the only way to keep this position on track with the position on your screen, queen takes d2 check. Now, I kept thinking to myself, I'm going to have to capture this with the queen and then return back. You know what I was saying earlier? No, you take it with the knight. And now this king that just stepped out to take, I should say, I would say take a hike, to get out of the check, that king has to go back. Look at that. So now they go back, and look at this. Boom. That's 6 moves. 6 moves for white, 5 moves for black. So if you look at the knight's path here, the knight went from b1 to c3, c3 to d5, d5 to f6, f6 to e4, e4 to d2, and d2 back to b1. Look at that interesting little shape here. This is pretty cool. Isn't that kind of interesting? So that's the answer. Did you get it? Did you solve it? Hopefully you did. If not, let me know what was tripping you up. For me, it was this pawn. And then once this pawn became clear, it became, okay, this pawn. But once I was able to unlock the key and realize that this queen had to be the thing to capture it, then it all started to come together, especially as you kick off with this knight move combined with this threat of d5. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot. It helps out Charity a lot. It's free to you, but it means a lot to me. And I would be incredibly grateful if you do. But otherwise, please feel free to leave feedback and let me know how I can improve my videos. Thanks so much. Bye.